The summer movie season is getting started, and so far this year, only Warner Brothers has managed to do really well. And Hollywood is now not so sure that this summer will be the return to form that they had been hoping for. Remember I told you during 2024 the saying was just survive until 2025? Well, it's been tough. It's not been the, people had thought things would get back to what it was like pre-pandemic and pre-strikes. And so far, not really. Summer 2019 is still the best summer that ever happened. It was the best, and then the pandemic happened. Oh, it was brutal. And so Hollywood would love to get back to where they were right before, everything just crumbled and fell apart and fell through their fingers. But they'd settle for just a couple of hits this summer, as they've managed to squeeze out the past few years, post-pandemic. Even with the strikes, they've managed to have a couple of hits. But will they be able to do that this summer? How many billion-dollar pictures will they have? I think only one is guaranteed. I don't think there's actually any guarantees for a billion-dollar picture. I see one, maybe two. You're going to see on this list the movies I think are most likely to hit $1 billion. But I'd be curious if you think any movies this summer are definitely going to hit $1 billion. And also for the wealth to go around, because last summer was definitely a Disney summer. So here's my list of what I think are the top 10 most anticipated movies of summer 2025, which again, as I said, is just getting started. And I'll be interested to hear your own thoughts, predictions, and lists down below. Number 10, let's make it interesting. Weapons. What? This movie's barely been publicized. They just dropped a teaser the other day, a true teaser. It was extremely short, very little information given in it. But I'm hearing buzz from my industry sources that this is a hot movie to keep our eye on. This is Zach Krieger's follow-up to Barbarian. He also produced Companion, which was pretty well received. But there was a bidding war for this script, and Warner Brothers won out in the end. Then, industry screenings of this completed film of Weapons have been so hot that they helped spark another bidding war for when Krieger was announced to be taking over Resident Evil and rebooting it, and that ended up staying at Sony. Pedro Pascal was supposed to star in this movie, but as we all know, he's very busy, and in fact had to end up turning Weapons down so he could do Fantastic Four. Josh Brolin has stepped in, interestingly enough, starring now opposite another Fantastic Four actor, Julia Garner. But her role is obviously much smaller, so she was able to do both. This movie is super hush-hush. But Warner Brothers just recently gave it a release date of August 8th, and that is a very nice release date. It's not technically the first weekend of August, which is the best release date for that month, but it's very close. And August 1st, so you kind of have two weekends of first weekends of August this year, and so that's an excellent date. It might end up being just chatter. It might not materialize, but Hollywood really feels this is going to be big. So it's worth keeping an eye on to see if the hype is real or if Hollywood continues to be disconnected from their customers. Roy Lee, horror producer extraordinaire, is on top of this one as well. So at the very least, even if it doesn't go huge in the mainstream space, I think it's going to make major waves in the horror space. Number 9, Thunderbolts. And this is interesting because of all the movies on this list, I've seen this one. I just saw it, but the review embargo lifts on Tuesday, April 29th. So I can't talk about it too much, but I can say, because the social media embargo has lifted, I can say it's a smaller film with less action than you would expect for a first weekend of May release. However, it is a very funny movie, and the action that it does have is excellent. But it is also very female-centric, largely focusing on Yelena and Val, which I loved. But it has also surprisingly little Winter Soldier. What about Sentry? Well, he's extremely cool, but not used very much either. I think this movie will connect with hardcore MCU fans, particularly the ones who like female characters. I think Wanda and Agatha fans are really going to like this movie because of Florence Pugh. Pew, 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 pew. They were already going crazy about her on the red carpet for this movie. But I'm not so sure about, let's say, some of some of the fans who'd be disappointed in a lack of Winter Soldier, let's say. And then also about casuals, because Marvel is in a slump right now, and Florence Pugh, as much as some of us love her, remains pretty much untested at the box office. And the few tests, like pre-tests that she's had, haven't gone so well. I mean, she was in Oppenheimer, but the real star there, she wasn't a lead, and obviously that was all about Christopher Nolan. I'm predicting a B+ cinema score, maybe an A-, but a B+, you can really work with a B+. Birds of Prey might have gotten a B+, but so did the first Joker. And I think maybe $500 to $600 million on this film is what I would think box office-wise, which would be much better than Captain America and would mean the movie is very likely to at least break even, if not make a little money in theaters. But Disney Marvel has been aggressively promoting Avengers Doomsday, which is set for next summer, 2026. And while we're all getting pretty excited about that movie, that tactic has the unfortunate side effect of making this summer's Marvel movies seem like opening acts rather than the main events. So I don't think Thunderbolts will bomb, and I think some of us are really going to love this movie, even if I think we can all agree there are a couple of missed opportunities with it. But I don't think it's going to set the world on fire either. We'll see. Number 8, F1. Do audiences still like Brad Pitt? I'd actually be particularly interested to hear your thoughts on this. I'm not sure myself. He's had his recent hits, but also his recent flops. And I think his personal situation with Angelina Jolie, I think this one's stuck. I think this last one truly has tarnished him with a number of people. Particularly, you see it on social media. I don't think social media is really a safe space for Brad Pitt anymore. But the second trailer for F1 looked incredible, and it's from Joseph Kosinski, hot off of Top Gun Maverick. Kosinski's been known for visually amazing films for his whole career, but sometimes they're not so good. But Top Gun Maverick was really good, although Christopher McQuarrie came in there and did some rewrites, so that might be why that one was better. So we'll see how F1 turns out. But in an era where moviegoers want movies to be extra to warrant that trip to the multiplex, well, this one looks plenty extra. And F1 is already a hot ticket in IMAX, where its early fan screenings a week before release are sold out already, and those aren't happening until late June. This could be a really big one on premium screens. This is for Warner Brothers, but also Apple, who's had a tough time theatrically. This one is rumored to be even more expensive than some of their other debacles, although the people who made the film insist that number is not true. But anyway, Apple was the first and only streaming service to win the Best Picture Oscar, and they did do very well with Brad Pitt and George Clooney with the movie Wolves, although that one blew up in their faces with the director, John Watts, refusing to return for a sequel because he was so upset it didn't get a theatrical release, even though it was so successful on Apple. So, speaking of seeing things in theaters, do you think you'll see F1 in theaters? Number 7, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. The biggest problem, obviously, with this movie that no one's talking about, which I find hilarious, is that it's the second half of a story to a movie that not a lot of people saw. And they've done a real good job of hiding that in the ad campaign, but I'm not quite sure how people are going to understand what's happening in this movie if they don't remember what happened in the last one. All right, but anyway, so yes, suddenly everyone's really into Mission Impossible, but where were you with the last movie? Yes, infamously, after the franchise's most successful entry to date with Fallout in 2018. What a movie. They had one of their weakest in 2023 when the movie flew too close to Barbenheimer and got burned bad by that pink explosion. Although I thought the last one was also just an absolutely incredible film. Maybe people have discovered it on digital and streaming. When did you see the last Mission Impossible, if you have seen it? Theaters, digital, or streaming? Or are you going to watch it, you promise, you swear, maybe, hopefully you'll get to it before the next one? All right, so Tom Cruise's signature franchise, even coming after Top Gun, his only billion-dollar film, by the way, with this last debacle, it seemed to lose all of its momentum and the ground that it had gained since Christopher McQuarrie had taken over. Yet with the supposedly final installment, they say it's the last one. I mean, Tom Cruise isn't retiring, but he promises this is the last Mission Impossible. Audiences finally seem interested. Speaking of finally, what? With the trailer getting significant traction on social media. Again, it's hard to believe considering none of you saw the last one in theaters. Final Reckoning is a Memorial Day weekend release, going head-to-head with Lilo and Stitch, which you would think is amazing counter-programming, like totally different audiences, right? But Lilo and Stitch could be a juggernaut, which would go beyond maybe families. Maybe everybody wants to see Lilo and Stitch, and that would not be so great for Mission Impossible. Although, a lot of days in the Memorial Day weekend, maybe you could see both, right? AMC A-List is expanding how many reservations you can make. We'll see how this almost 30-year franchise wraps up. Tom Cruise has been making these movies for 30 years. That's pretty amazing. Bond has $1 billion movie. Mission Impossible has 0. Can it get one? Can it get $1 billion movie before it ends? Number 6, Jurassic World Rebirth. What? What's this movie doing so far down on my list when the past 3 Jurassic World movies have each pulled in $1 billion? Well, I gotta tell you, I'm not totally feeling this new film. I mean, it still might make $1 billion. It might be obligatory at this point where people are like, we gotta go see that new dinosaur movie, even if we're not particularly excited about it. But I do wonder, are you excited about Jurassic World Rebirth? They've only had one trailer, and I don't think it was particularly exciting. We'll see. I think Hollywood has severely underestimated how important Chris Pratt was to the previous trilogy. And Universal hasn't really found a replacement for him. They wanted Glenn Powell, who would have been an excellent replacement, but Glenn Powell said no thank you, which I think was a big mistake for Glenn Powell. We'll see. Glenn Powell certainly is getting a lot of other work, but I think he would have been excellent to take over this franchise. This new movie does have Scarlett Johansson coming from Marvel, Jonathan Bailey from Wicked, and then, of course, 2-time Oscar winner Mahershala Ali, The Blade That Never Was. Hopefully, someday that title changes for him. But while those are definitely actors who have fans, so far, I don't think any of them have proven that they are box office draws by themselves. I'm sure some of you who are in their fandoms will be like, what? But I'm nervous about it. I'm nervous. Now, you might be like, it's the dinosaurs that are the draw, Grace, and that's certainly true. But it hasn't always worked out for this franchise, even when it's had dinosaurs. And also, this newest installment is saying they want to put the horror back in these films. But are they really horror movies? I think, talk about misunderstandings. I think that Jurassic Park and now Jurassic World, I think the fundamental emotion has been not fear, but wonder. Think about the memes and GIFs that are most associated with this franchise. They're the ones that focus on the wonder. From a theme park for dinosaurs or someone who can be a dinosaur cowboy. That really was what Chris Pratt's character was. And I think it worked really, really well. And I don't see a similar angle for this newest installment. But people love dinosaurs. They sure love dinosaurs. And as I said, this could still be just an easy billion, even if people aren't that excited about it. Okay, now we're entering the top 5. The top 5 most anticipated movies for this summer. And I'm curious to see how our lists compare. These are the stars, hopefully, of summer 2025. So number 5, 28 years later. That's right, I put it above Jurassic World Rebirth because this movie is so far pretty freaking exciting. Did Sinners, though, steal this movie's thunder? Or did the success of Ryan Coogler's highbrow horror film make audiences even more interested, more hungry for one from Danny Boyle and Alex Garland? In fact, Jack O'Connell from Sinners is in this movie as well. The first two 28 days and then weeks later, those movies are very highly regarded, but it seems that Boyle and Garland have really stepped up their game here, as evidenced by their incredible first trailer, with that Rudyard Kipling poem recited in a recording from 1915. Oh my gosh, what a trailer! That is like one of the best trailers of all time. Can the movie even live up to that trailer? Well, if it even comes close, Sony has a real banger on their hands. And I hope that recording is in the movie. In fact, Sony has a spin-off also planned for this, a real 1-2 punch with 28 years later, The Bone Temple, coming out just mere months later in January 2026 and directed by Nia DaCosta, who was a pretty hot director until the Marvels, unfortunately, caused some issues for her. But she might be able to get right back on it with this film. I think, if you watched her remake of Candyman, she had really amazing visuals in that film. She might be an excellent choice for this project. Speaking of comic book movies, though, can Aaron Taylor Johnson, who stars in both of these films, the main one and the spinoff, can he get over the stink of Craven? Wow, comic book movies derailing a lot of careers these days. No wonder people are starting to say no to them. Luckily, though, this movie also has Ralph Fiennes coming off of Conclave, and also now super ripped, and Jodie Comer to help out. This franchise, as it seems to have been reimagined, years later. This is 28 years later into this apocalypse. Kind of seeing some similarities to A Quiet Place, especially the first two films. And, we'll see if there's some overlap there. But what could really distinguish 28 years later, and certainly has distinguished its trailers, is that it lets its freak flag fly. And if they do that just right, you don't want to be too, you never want to go full freak flag, right? But if you do that just right, it could really translate to a huge hit for Sony, especially with just a $75 million budget. Beautiful. Love to see it. Number 4, The Naked Gun. I wouldn't think this movie would have made my list before CinemaCon. It wasn't on anyone's radar. But then at CinemaCon, Paramount dropped that teaser trailer that social media just went crazy over. From Liam Neeson being super game for this style of raunchy humor to a pretty gutsy OJ joke that landed. That's impressive. After Ted, can Seth MacFarlane, who's a producer here, truly make a live-action Family Guy style movie? Ted certainly had elements of that, but this very much seems like it's in the same vein as Family Guy. Also, Lonely Island's Akiva Schaffer directs and co-writes, which is also, I think, an excellent sign for this film. And even though she didn't rate the teaser trailer, which is kind of weird, but I'm sure we'll see her soon, this remake also stars Pamela Anderson coming off of her successful awards run with The Last Showgirl. And it hits theaters, it does, yeah, it's the first weekend of August. So this is the first weekend of August, and then Weapons right after. Comedy and then horror. Oh, that's beautiful. That's a really nice start to August this year. There hasn't been a Naked Gun movie in over 30 years. This franchise has been around as long as Mission Impossible, although, of course, Leslie Nielsen is unfortunately no longer with us. But as Liam Neeson takes over, it might indeed be time for this it was a hugely successful franchise back in the day. It might be time for it to return. Number 3, Fantastic Four. Now, I'm not sure how this movie's going to do at the box office, but at least right now, audiences are interested in it, and that's always a good sign. There seems to be intense interest in the Fantastic Four. Sure, this is the third and technically fourth live-action version of these characters, but maybe that's why Kevin Feige decided to, and was right to, go with such a bold, highly stylized approach to set his Fantastic Four apart from the ones that have come before. The Incredibles, the Jetsons, Mad Men, all rolled into one. And those are good. Mad Men, I've told you, is historic, Mad Men was celebrated critically, but it actually did very poorly in the ratings. But The Incredibles is done extremely well, and The Jetsons is also popular. So I see the thought process. But also, Feige had to go with far from his first choices for all of the roles, with A-listers turning down this script left and right. Just like rumors have been surrounding Sean Levy's upcoming Star Wars film, and A-listers turning that one down as well. Hey, franchises are a tough place these days, not just for fans, but it's also spread to talent, as we just discussed with, 28 years later, with the Marvels and Craven really hurting some talent there, in front of and behind the camera. But luckily for Fantastic Four, fans seem to be supporting this one, at least for now. I think fans aren't totally decided on if the cast turned out, but I do think that it's fortunate in that it at least has actors with strong, very vocal fan bases to help out. Also, Fantastic Four has the Deadpool and Wolverine release date coming out right at the start of Comic-Con. In the past, movies have found themselves competing with Comic-Con, but Ryan Reynolds had the brilliant idea to use Comic-Con to amplify his movie. That Reynolds, marketing genius. And we'll see if Feige and company can do that move without Reynolds, because Reynolds was the one who put that together. They could just copy it, but then I think that's going to look kind of lame if they're doing the exact same thing that Ryan Reynolds did Reynolds, as you might recall, had a Friday panel celebrating the release, and then it ended with a drone show. And they could do the exact same thing, and, I wouldn't blame them if they did, but I think, well, let's just see how it turns out. What do you think of this? We'll also see if Fantastic Four has enough action to make it feel worthy of a trip to the multiplex once and then multiple times. I feel that could be an issue for Thunderbolts. And director Matt Shakman does come from the small screen, and come to think of it, so does the Thunderbolts director, and that could have an impact on these films. But yeah, people are at least really curious about the Fantastic Four film. And you know what? Maybe Disney can have both animated and live action superhero families. Then number 2, runner-up, Lilo and Stitch. Are we looking at Disney's Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine of 2025? Very possibly. So Lilo and Stitch was originally supposed to be a Disney Plus movie, just like Moana 2 was supposed to be a Disney Plus series. And Moana 2 went on to become a billion-dollar film in theaters. And I think of all the films on this list, Lilo and Stitch is the most likely to hit $1 billion. Lilo and Stitch, and then I would say Jurassic World Rebirth. But with Jurassic World Rebirth, I'm only going on the track record of the last 3 movies, which all hit $1 billion, even though people said they hated them. But Lilo and Stitch, I'm basing on the strength of the ad campaign and the reaction to that ad campaign so far. The animated movie of Lilo and Stitch came out over 20 years ago, but it has been building momentum ever since because it never went away, thanks to Disney merchandise and the Disney theme parks. At this point, everyone at every age and every demographic loves Stitch. Talk about broad appeal. And once we saw that Disney had gotten the live action version just right, it's incredible how well this is translated, and somehow managed to talk creator Chris Sanders to come back to voice Stitch, even though he'd angrily quit Disney just a few years after Lilo and Stitch had come out. The movie is in very good shape. In fact, Lilo and Stitch has so much hype that it's undercutting another Chris Sanders associated project, and that's Universal's live-action remake of his 2010 animated film. Dean DeBlois has really been associated with How to Train Your Dragon as the lead creative, but for that first film, Chris Sanders was involved, which is why Toothless and Stitch look so similar and have a similar vibe. And here they are, hitting theaters in live action just 2 weeks apart. I think that's going to end up being potentially a real problem for How to Train Your Dragon. And you see everyone talking about Lilo and Stitch and not really How to Train Your Dragon, which I think that's not good for the second film. So if Lilo and Stitch, I think, is the film pretty much the only summer movie pretty much guaranteed to hit $1 billion, how is it not my number 1 movie? And which movie is number 1? That's right, it's Superman, because hit or flop, this is the movie that everyone has their eyes glued to. This is the big dramatic movie of the summer. This is the Real Housewives of the summer 2025 movie season. I think for a couple of reasons. First off, while the MCU tries to pivot, the DCU, as it's now called, is rebooting. Well, kind of rebooting. It's not a full reboot, which I still feel might haunt it, but it's technically a reboot. So everyone, from fans to casuals to the press to Hollywood itself, is really curious to see if this will work or be a horrible disaster. Either way, we all want a front row seat. How many other franchises are currently having a real hard time right now, right? And maybe would like to do their own quick reboot with almost no turnaround time. I mean, The Flash and Aquaman just came out in 2023. Think about how long Star Wars has been on a movie break. Usually you need to take a real break to do a reboot. But James Gunn is trying to do a real quick turnaround. So if he can pull it off, how many other franchises would therefore be inspired to maybe do the same? Or if it doesn't work out, we'll be like, whew, don't do that. We're just going to have to keep going forward. Then, speaking of James Gunn, there's the intense ownership that he has decided to exert over this film. You could say he's become a controversial figure, but those of us who remember when even he was first hired for Guardians of the Galaxy, he's always been a controversial figure. But he enjoys intense support from his very vocal fan base, but also the majority of the entertainment press, which has really helped him substantially. Fans, though, overall are a little bit of a different story, with his detractors growing, particularly over the past few years, especially with a lot of missteps that he's had in how he handles himself on social media to this day, and an ad campaign that has been disappointing and caused some of even his most ardent supporters to maybe question what's happening with this film. But again, it's the drama. It's amazing. So this isn't just a referendum on DC, but on James Gunn himself. And then it's been taking a long time for Bob Iger to decide what he wants to do with Star Wars and Marvel, even though they're both floundering, right? Hollywood overall is often slow to act, especially with leadership, because Hollywood's very good at spreading around the blame. You're not quite sure who's at fault, right? But with this, Gunn has taken such singular ownership of the Superman movie, his new DCU could then therefore end up being DOA. Or it could be a massive hit. As I said, if it's a massive hit, James Gunn will become a movie genre god. That would be incredible. Or it could just be a moderate hit, which I honestly think is the worst thing that could happen, because it wouldn't provide clarity of a strong direction for where DC needs to go next. And we just continue to muddle around with James Gunn's pet projects that tickle his fancy, and then Matt Reeves doing his own thing right next to him. But they would be separate, but yet not separate. And I think that would just contribute to the slow but definite death of the superhero genre that we're kind of all witnessing. But that's not to say it can't maybe be revived at the last minute. We'll see. But as I said, no matter what happens, it'll certainly be interesting to watch, and everybody wants a front row seat, which is why Superman, I believe, is the most anticipated movie of the summer. All right, so that is my top 10 list of the most anticipated movies coming out for summer 2025. And I've put up the other big films that are coming out, so you can not only see what did not make my list, but what might make yours. So share your thoughts, predictions, and lists down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.